our New Jersey Preserve Manager, and Lily Wallach, our Preserve Assistant, are going to talk to us about the Maurice River Bluffs Preserve in Cumberland County. And I am going to go ahead and turn it over to them. If you have questions, just stick them in the chat and we're going to go through all the questions at the end.
All right, hello. Thanks for coming in and listening. Today we're going to talk about our Maurice River Bluffs Preserve. Really super cool place. Straight away, if you've never been there, you should go and see it for yourself. It's quite remarkable. This first slide, as you can see, even down here, even though there's some pines, the bluffs has hickories and other deciduous trees. If you come in the fall, you can get some pretty amazing foliage for down here. So where is the Maurice River Bluffs Preserve? It's in Cumberland County. And if you look at this map, you can see the red circle there. Up top of it is Union Lake. This is the National Historic and Scenic Maurice River. It was designated, I believe, in the 90s by Al Gore. It's quite a designation. Super clean, super important, full of rare plants. Around it is a lot of protected land, as you can see as well. This is the city of Millville up here, and then Bridgeton over here. So it's out a little bit. It seems like you're out in a really cool place, but you're near an urban area as well. So there's places to shop or go into a city-like atmosphere as well. So it's got some neat surroundings around it. Like I said, other natural areas you could pop into as well. But as you'll see, as we go through this slideshow, this place isn't like other places around. It's quite unique. It has a super awesome history. The Maurice River was used a long time just as a transport, not just for the bluffs, but other areas. For the bluffs, since it was a sand mine, they had humongous barges that would come up the Maurice River. They would take sand off the preserve, and the sand in parts of the Bluffs Preserve is super refined. It's like sugar. It was used, lots of people, different uses. It was even taken overseas. The sand was so pure. And some of these barges were so big, you could barely turn them around in the river. So huge transportation route. And these are, old aerials of certain parts of the Maurice River. I'll try to tell you which ones are taken on our preserve exactly. But these are real pictures and what it was like. And they use some of the sand to manufacture asphalt for new roads and so forth, plus other things, I'm sure. And on the preserve, it went on for about 70 years, which is quite a long time, up until the early 1970s. And parts of it, which you'll see, were also a hub for corn-based chicken feed. In the nearby city of Vineland, there was lots of activity and stuff going on with chickens, and the Bluffs was part of it. What you're looking at there is a really long early barge. You can see that little train up there. They called them pony trains, clearly a lot smaller than a normal train, but they would go in and out of the preserve and put sand in these buckets, and then they would just dump them down these chutes into the boats. Seems primitive, but that's the way they did it. And this happened on our preserve. This is a really neat photo. This was it seems even older and possibly a more primitive way to do it. But to your left there is a sand chute. This little old truck used to be filled with sand, and you would dump it down the chute and it would go inside the barge. Super hard work, I would imagine. Now, on other places of the preserve, they did this same technique, but they used mules. And so just picture a mule with a harness on it, with a little trailer on the back of it. And they made these routes that were so well defined, they had used them so well that they would fill it up with sand, and the mule would walk around to the barge and back up. And when it backed up, the trailer was designed in such a way that it would dump the sand. And then the bucket would go back down, and then the mule would go back to where they were loading the sand. That is a little more primitive than this, but it's quite unique, and I thought that was a neat story. You'll see remains of loading docks and pilings. They're still evident on the riverbanks at the preserve. If you just go down to the water line, you see them all along there. You could tell that there was activity that was happening. And, you know, some of them have like 5 telephone poles wrapped together with cable. You could just tell large, really large ships had to come up to these ports that they made. This giant structure here is very similar to the ones we had on our preserve. This is on the Maurice River. I'm just not 100% sure if it was ours, because ours currently has a bluff here. But the remnants of these giant corn silos are there. You can see them now. They're humongous, round concrete structures. It's just a neat part of history that's still there and will remain there for a long time. And there's loads of this in the preserve, and you'll see some more of it in a minute. It just shows you the activity. It was quite a hub. When I first started managing this preserve, I wanted to know the history as best that I could find. And the history of the preserve goes back quite far to the early 1800s, as does a house that we're going to talk about. So I ended up in Bridgeton in one of the oldest parts of the library. And I kept finding this property being referenced, and it went all the way back to 1838. And then the books stopped. So it probably went even further than that. And you can see a little chain of ownership. It's kind of neat to capture this and put it together. And, you know, it'd be like $20. They would sell the property here, and it was kind of neat. And then it eventually got to where the Crystal Sand Company owned it, and they sand mined it for quite a long time. Patinas eventually owned it, and then kind of changing it into Better Materials. In 2004, TNC was able to get a chunk of the preserve. The preserve's 500 acres or so, but the chunk that you walk along and stuff was in 2004, almost 300 acres. Quite a bit of money. With help of Green Acres, it was nearly $1 million. There was plans to have a huge barge port on the preserve. There were plans to have condos up and down the river. And these were real plans. Would it have happened if we didn't get in there and purchase it? Who knows? It could have. And it would have taken away just a kind of a magical gem of a place. So it's very fortunate that TNC was there and we're doing the good work that we do. Here's a farmhouse I was referencing earlier. It was built in the late 1700s to early 1800s, quite old. I had 2 different gentlemen come in that could date stone and even tell where it came from. Everybody has a specialty, right? So they came in and dated this house to about that age. And the stone is not from New Jersey. It's from specific counties in Chester, Pennsylvania. You know, how did the stones get here? I don't know. I thought ballast in ships maybe, but they told me they didn't use this kind of stone in ships. So that's a bit of a mystery, but it's still here. It's still at the preserve, and you'll see images of it. It's cool to have this full image of this house. I've got some neat stories from locals that lived in it. It's quite a remarkable structure. And the guy that came and looked at the design of it said it's the only one of, you know how each house may have a different architecture. Oh, that's a so-and-so kind of house. This one, he had only ever seen once before. He said it was quite special and should be protected as best as possible. So someday we may try to, cap the edges off with concrete or something like that to save it. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. It doesn't look like what you're seeing right now. Time has passed on it. But this is the front of it, or was the front of it. If you go up to it now, you can still see the axe marks in the door. And it just shows you, it's just handmade, hand-hewn stuff put together. Everything was hard work back then. But quite a beautiful place and lots of character. Never had electricity, only had a phone line, even up into the 90s before the fire that happened to it. There still wasn't electricity to it. They just didn't want it. There's a couple people that I see regularly there that did live in it at a time. Just a super cool place. Here it is again. This is the house, this little guy here, and the back of it, and this is the property. This is a huge farm field. You'll see a little bit more about this in a minute. They actually farm this, which I find incredible because it's, you know, like beach sand out there. But they had to supplement the soil incredibly to keep that. If you were to look at this now, you would see trees, basically. We try to keep portions of this open and in a somewhat mid-successional state. We have prairie warblers and other birds that like to nest there, and they like this kind of habitat. So we're trying to keep that for as long as we can. We may even do some other things in this field. I think we're going to try to plant some pollinators in this part. But like I said, it does not look like this now. It looks almost like that, but not quite. These fields were planted as part of a mitigation effort. What that means is the sand mining, whoever was doing the sand mining, did something and they had to mitigate to pay for it. So these were planted in a kind of a loblolly like pine. So there's even age stands. If you walk through these areas, you're like, oh, why are these trees kind of in rows and stuff? Well, that's why. Nice old area though, quite nice. This is the field you saw. It's hard to believe if you know this preserve at all, or when you go out there, that this was the field next to the house, because it looks nothing like it now. But you can see that, I mean, it worked. They had to really work the soil to get crops out of there, but they farmed for years in these fields. Still find it. Once you spend time out there and see what the soil is like, you'll understand, I guess, what they had to go through to keep you know, vegetables growing successfully out here. All right, a little more about it. This is on the left. This is our property boundary. There's a couple more pieces to this preserve, but this is largely, this is where all the trails are. This is where we have put resources and everything else that we do for the public. This is the spot here. So it's, you know, approaching 600 acres and 4.5 miles of river frontage, which is quite nice on the Maurice River. 50-foot bluffs in areas. This is the only, our preserve is the only place on the entire Maurice River, which is something like 15 miles long, that has these bluffs. Quite strange if you're not used to seeing that on the side of the river. So it creates, you know, places you can stand and just see all the way across the river and down the river. Quite nice. On the left, you'll see a little bit of development over here, some down to the left, but for the most part, this is now protected forever. This will never be developed. So this part of the river, at least, and this side, because it's complete marsh, is protected forever. There'll never be any development in here to hinder the, you know, nature in its own right there. And the Maurice River Watershed, which is part of, supports 53% of the animals on the New Jersey endangered species list. You know, includes a couple of tributaries, but you know, it's a pretty remarkable fact. It's a stopover for migratory birds and raptors. We have our own, not like we own it, but it's on our preserve, nesting bald eagle pair. They've been there for about a decade. I've been successful every year. You can see it with a pair of binoculars. They're really cool to watch. They're resident eagles. Eagles have their chicks in the winter, oddly enough. That sounds strange, but that's what they do. And so we close the trail for around 6 months of the year. That gets within 1,000 feet of the nest, and we have a little alternate trail that you can go through, and then we open it back up. We had another eagle nest within sight of this one, which would have been just unbelievable to have eagle nests that close. And it got bigger and bigger for a few years, and I would see birds go in and out of it, and it kind of went away. And I don't know why they didn't go there. Maybe it was too close to the original nest, I'm not sure. But it's clearly great habitat for them. And there's osprey nests up and down the Maurice River. It's really cool to watch. If you go when the osprey are catching fish and nesting with their own chicks and so forth, you spend about an hour at the end of a dock we have that you'll see in a minute. You'll watch the osprey are superior to fishing than eagles. I mean, they're the best out of all birds. They're the best fishermen. It's absolutely crazy to watch them. They hardly ever miss. The eagles are not that good at it. They wait till the osprey gets it, and then they swoop down at them. And it seems like 50% of the time, the osprey gets so just annoyed that it drops the fish, and then the eagle goes and grabs it. They do it all summer long. That's something neat to watch as well. Along our preserve, and you can see this from the bluffs and other areas, It's home to New Jersey's largest contiguous stand of wild rice. This is native, bona fide wild rice. It's called Zizania aquatica. You can eat it. I ate it when I was out there in a kayak raw. I wouldn't suggest that. It doesn't taste that good, but it's there, and it's really neat to see wild rice. I believe the indigenous peoples use this extensively. So there's some neat updates on that. Lily's going to come on and talk about visitation for a little bit.
Alrighty, so within this preserve, we have 5 different trails that you can kind of see all along here. They run along the river, which is really nice. You get some awesome river views. They also go through the forest, so you really feel isolated, like you're deep in nature. And another thing that people should know is this is actually a dog-friendly preserve, so long as they are on a leash. So it's a really fun place to bring your dog for a walk as well. So the trails vary in length and level of difficulty. So some of them are pretty flat, some of them are a little bit more hilly. So you can kind of customize the type of hike that you're looking for depending on what you are up to that day. And the hills and valleys in this preserve provide a pretty unique topography for southern New Jersey. You don't really see this type of landscape down here, so it is nice to be able to go and feel a little bit challenged when you're doing a hike. It doesn't feel so flat like a lot of the other preserves are down here. So as we've said a few times, it does line up with the Maurice River, which you get really amazing views of it. You get really nice views of the wild rice across the river there. And also out on the river, we do have a few osprey platforms that you can see from a few different spots along the trails. And if the tide is out further enough, you can actually do some beach combing along the river as well. People have found old pieces of pottery and arrowheads and things like that. So it's a very good place for beach combing when the tide is right. Another thing, we have plenty of places for people to, stop and take a break if they need to. There's a few different picnic tables located on different trails, benches, things like that. And it also provides a nice place to have, a scenic meal or a snack or something like that. A lot of them overlook the water. It's a really, really, really pretty place to enjoy. Along the Blue Trail at the river entrance, we have a kayak launch. So if people wanted to, they could take their kayaks out there and go up and down the river. It's definitely a really, really fun activity to do with your friends or family, or take the kids out. And also along the Blue Trail, we have a dock. We'll see that in a few slides, but people are welcome to fish there. You're welcome to go out on your boat and fish. And there's definitely plenty of people can be seen doing that basically on a daily basis in the summer. So this, believe it or not, is the farmhouse that Damon was talking about earlier. There are still remains of it. They are located on the Blue Trail as well. It's pretty awesome to go up and explore it and see it. Unfortunately, in the 90s, there was a fire. It was fully intact until then, but now this is what's left of it. And it's pretty neat. You can actually see that it seems like in every room there was a fireplace. And I love personally that the trees are growing in through it. I just think that looks so cool. We also, in addition to the eagles that nest every year, we have a black vulture family that nests every year in the Bluffs as well. And if you're lucky enough, you may see some of their chicks. I know Damon came across 3 of them this year when he was walking down the Blue Trail. So they're super interesting to look at. Their chicks are, a face only a mother could love, in my opinion, but they're pretty cool birds. Along the Yellow Trail is where you're going to find the historical sand mines and the loading dock remnants that Damon was speaking about. And this down here is also on the Yellow Trail. These were actually part of the old railroad tracks that the pony cars that he was talking about would ride on with the sand, and then they would go and dump it. So that's pretty neat. They're really cool to explore. They make for really good photo opportunities. People really enjoy them. And they're a nice reminder of the unique history of the preserve as well. So another major draw that we have for this preserve is we actually have 6 miles of mountain biking trails in addition to the 6 miles of the hiking trails. These also have a variety of lengths and difficulties, so they're good for any level of mountain bikers. And they were built using the International Mountain Biking Association standards, so they are top quality. The trails feature a variety of obstacles, jumps, bridges, things like that, so you can kind of feel a little challenged. They're really exciting rides. But in addition to the challenging courses, we also do have a beginner route. That's just for people who are maybe new to the sport, want to look into a new hobby, something like that. So there's a little something for everyone. On the Orange Trail, we have a bird blind. As Damon said, this is a stopover for a lot of migrating birds. The bird blind overlooks the wetlands and does provide a great view. You see the osprey platforms, of course, a lot of different songbirds come through, raptors during the fall, so it's a great spot for birding in addition to hiking. The dock that I mentioned earlier, this is what it looks like. It's located near the Kayak Launch on the Blue Trail. It is a floating dock. You can kind of see the osprey platform over here, so you do get some good views over there. And this is actually the best place on the preserve to view the eagle nest that Damon was speaking about earlier. People are welcome to fish here. We've seen people doing yoga on this dock. It's just a really nice place to sit and relax and really, really get into the preserve. And along the Orange Trail, we have a bridge. This is actually made out of 100% recycled plastic. So is the bird blind that we saw earlier. This is just kind of a fun feature. People enjoy it. It's, again, a good spot for a photo opportunity. And Damon put this together, so it's something that he can look back on and be proud of. And now Damon's going to talk about some of the species that we see at the preserve.
Thanks, Lily. So what we have quite a few of is North America's most widespread terrestrial carnivore, if you can get your head around that statement. The red foxes. This is one of the bluffs you see right here. This is about 40 feet high. It's vertical. So these fox do not walk up this at all. These are kits, they're called. These are the young. If you were to go back into this den and go straight up about, I don't know, it seemed about 10 or 15 feet, but maybe it was angled so it wasn't that steep, but this came up to the surface. So they would go down, and foxes live underground, oddly enough. I know that may sound strange, but they dig little burrows, and we have another spot on the preserve that has southern exposure and sand, and it's filled with fox dens. It's pretty cool. So these guys were just hanging out, looking out over the river one day. You never know what you're going to see. And kingfishers, it's a bird. Look it up. It's got a big bill, squat, really neat looking, superior fisher. They make holes in here as well. Some of the other species that you might come across, box turtles are all over the place. They're really neat and a very long-lived species. It's just a long-lived creature. I know something like 50, 60 years, the little box turtle. On the left here is a pink lady slipper, an amazing orchid. There's not too many things that can get in it, but if a bee tries to get in it, it has to force its way in there, and it cannot get back out the same hole. It has to go out a different spot, and when it does, it's forced to get rubbed against the pollen. It's a kind of a neat plant. This is our eagle, I keep saying, but this is one of the eagles that was in the nest. Down to your right, this is wild lupin. Really cool plant. That grows inside the preserve as well. This is woodland orchid. We do have orchids as well. You have to search for them, but they're there. The pink lady slipper just grows right on the side of the trail if you pay attention there, and they're super cool. Lots of these plants have a fungal relationship with something called mycelium on the forest floor. It covers the whole forest floor. About 80% of plants do. The reason I mention it is because people used to try to dig up lady slippers, and I'll dig this up with a shovel, take it home and grow it, and they never grow. It's because they didn't dig up the mycelium that it was attached to as well, and so they don't make it. On your right, this is called a Needham skimmer. There's parts of the preserve. That field I was showing you that used to be farmed is full of these things. This is not that common of a dragonfly, but there's lots of them at the Bluffs. And we have a little hidden pond that's full of dragonflies as well. So if you're, dragonfly hunting is fun. It's easy to do. You get great pictures. It's a great activity. If you get into it, the Bluffs is a wonderful place to try your hand at photographing them, which is challenging in and of itself, considering they can always see you. It's the southern leopard frog on the bottom, and these were all taken at the preserve. This on the bottom right is a chanterelle. It's a kind of a mushroom. It is edible. I don't recommend you eat anything that you don't know, though. But these are just common things that you'll see. If you spend enough time there, like for instance, the past month or so, you know how much it's been raining. It seems like every other day for a while there. I've never in my life seen so many mushrooms at the Bluffs in all the years I've been there. They're just absolutely everywhere. And I have volunteers that had just phones full of pictures of all kinds of purples, reds, greens. It's a great time to be walking around, if you're into that kind of thing. They're great because they don't move around. You can take as much time as you want to photograph them. This is what you would see if you were out in a kayak and looked up and was looking for wild rice. This is the view you'll get. If you get when it's seeding and blooming like before, it might be pink, but this kind of most of the time is what you get. I just pulled this down, stripped them off, and threw them in my mouth. Probably won't be doing that again. And thank you for staying in. This is a view. This is my favorite view of the whole preserve, I think. It's the top of the White Trail. It gives you a huge perspective down there. And when I first started working on these trails, it took me a couple years to make all these trails. There was a indigenous encampment right here on the White Trail. I found pieces of pottery and then someone dug it all up. But I can see, and you can see why they would like to camp here. You can see up the river, down the river, who's coming, who's going, and it's, just the beauty in and of itself is amazing. And that has a picnic table right at that spot. So you can walk to the White Trail, get your lunch, overlook the river. Just another one of the, another magical spot in this preserve. At the end of the farthest trail to the north is also an artesian well. It's been running since the 40s. If you don't know what an artesian well is, it just happens because of pressure under the ground. I won't go into the details and bore you, but what happens is water comes out of the ground, and if you attach a pipe or something else to transport water to it, it will run for 50 years, 100 years, 200 years with no electricity. Just water just runs. And it's been running out of the Bluffs for, 70 years or so. Super cold, super fresh. It's neat, and you can just walk down and check it out, and it's been dripping there. It's another neat piece of the history here. So I suggest you come and check it out. You could spend probably 2.5, 3 hours if you walk at a normal pace and hit every single trail and maybe stop to have lunch somewhere. Throughout the trail system, there are You Are Here maps. I think Lily was talking about. They're very detailed. It tells you exactly where you are. If you look to the right on the map and there's a trail, you physically look to the right and the trail is there. They're geo-referenced to reality, and they tell you you're long and lat. And if you call 911 and say, I'm hurt or I'm lost or something, they'll know exactly where you are if they can't locate you with your phone. So we've tried to make it as safe and pleasant as possible as well. So please come and visit. And thanks so much for coming and listening today.
Thank you so much, Damon and Lily.
Sure.
If anyone has questions, you can put them through the chat. Damon, I already have a couple of questions for you two.
Sure.
Why did TNC preserve the Maurice River Bluffs, and when?
This particular spot, I believe, was, let's see what it might say. It goes all the way back to 1992. This preserve has many pieces to it. If we go all the way back to the beginning, it goes pretty far. But this particular spot where we have all the trails, I believe was 2006. I'm gonna get my slide on that one again, but The reason we protected it is because it's a sensitive place for one. It's right on the edge of the water. It was unprotected. There were pretty awful plans that some developers had for this place. One of them was condominiums all down the side of the bluffs. Like you would just, when you went up the river, you would see, 4 miles of homes, which just, it would have just destroyed the whole character of the place, let alone what it would have done for the ecosystem there. Also plans for a super huge barge port, which it doesn't doesn't even sound good. It wouldn't have been good. It would just been masses of these barges transporting. It just would have been ugly. Those were the main reasons. There's some endangered species as well. But you wrap it all up. It's just an amazing package, an amazing place. One of the last few unprotected places at the time, and the only one with the bluffs. So that's why we took the leap before. We've done that at other preserves as well, that they may have had really terrible plans for nature and people, and came in and saved it at the last minute, which we kind of did here.
Here's a good one. What is the best time to visit to avoid ticks?
So this is the same anywhere in southern New Jersey, I would imagine. So certainly after the first freeze or frost, the ticks are gone, which, that varies. Could be October, it could be November. But I would imagine if you come any time in the winter, you don't have to worry about it. I should preface that by saying the way the climate has been, I'm even occasionally getting ticks in January because, all of a sudden it's 60 degrees in January for 2 or 3 days and they're cropping up and walking around. But early spring, late fall, and winter, you'll rarely get any. If it's one piece of consolation, if you look up a product that has permethrin in it, there's one called Permanone. I'm not advocating for the company or anything, but I've had Lyme disease, I've had Rocky Mountain, I had all these things. If you use this stuff, you will never have another tick on you, because I understand your question. It's a real threat. If you know anybody that has Lyme disease or associated symptoms from something like that, it can take away your life. So it's important that you take these precautions, and cutter and off and all of that. The ticks in southern New Jersey laugh at that. They walk right over it. I swear they do. You can watch them. So use either a product called Permanone or something that has permethrin in it, and we can give you that. And, go by the directions on the thing. It's not for your skin. You just spray it on your boots and your bottom pant legs, and you simply won't get one. You'll really decrease your chances of getting ticks if you just stay right in the middle of the trail. I know, you don't always want to stay in the trail in life. You want to go off a little bit, but if you do, your risk will drop substantially than just clambering around in the woods.
I have a bunch more questions coming in. We'll try to get through them quickly. Where is the entrance to the preserve located?
It's, if you type in Google 1200 Silver Run Road, Silver, Silver Run Road, Millville, New Jersey, 08332, takes you right to the entrance, like dead right to the entrance. That's actually, since we put the preserve there and put a telephone pole there and a meter and stuff, they have to give us a number, address, and that's the number. It puts you right on the entrance.
There's a big sign out front too. You can't miss it.
Yeah, there's a 10-foot green sign out front that says Maurice River Bluffs. Green sign.
Okay, we had a question about the fee to enter. There is no fee. All of our nature preserves are free and open to the public. Next question, how far can you kayak?
So to kayak at the preserve, you do have to carry your kayak down to the water. We don't have a place where you drive a pickup truck up and slide it off. We have a road that does that, but we can't open it up to the public for loads of reasons. But the Maurice River is like, 15 miles long. If you were to put in down there, you can go for miles. And if you plan it right and just go on the internet and find the tides, because the Maurice River is tidal, water comes up and goes down. If you follow the tide and play it right, It's a very pleasant trip. You don't have to paddle hardly at all. If you were to put in at our dock, go upstream for half hour, 40 minutes, you can pull off to the artesian well. There's an open spot, open sandy spot. You pull out, you go out, you check the artesian well out, get back in your kayak and go back to the dock. If you did that, that's, you could go an hour and a half, 2 hours taking your time, and it's a very pleasant kayak ride. But you can go for miles either way.
Okay, Stacy, for your question, yes, we're going to send a recording to everyone via email, and then we'll send some more information about future webinars. And then I have a couple more for you, Damon. Can we go into the ruins, or are they off limits?
They're off limits. It's clearly not a safe structure. We have ropes in front of it. That being said, of course, and people still go in there, but it's a, obviously a massive liability for us. We don't want to just tear it down because of that. So we put up roads, we put up area close signs, but to be honest, you're only 15 feet from it.
Yeah, you get very close.
You can see in there, and you go at the right time of year, you can see the black vulture standing in the open stone windows. It's either super awesome or super creepy, depending on who you are when you see it, I guess. But you could see well enough just standing behind the ropes.
Okay, I think this is our last question. Are any of the trails handicapped accessible?
By U.S. standards, no, they're not. You could make it nearly to the dock down a road that we drive our trucks down to maintenance and stuff. It's a regular wide dirt road. But it's not designed handicap. I mean, I wish we could. The rest of the place is nearly impossible because you go 20 feet and there's a drop off or a hill. There's so much topography there. But thank you for the question. And we've been thinking of ways to go from the parking lot down to the dock. If you had the right, I'm not sure what handicap, but if it was a chair and you had one that had, I've seen ones with bigger wheels on, I know you could make it down there, but it's not designed for it. We haven't done that at that point.
Okay, I think that was all the questions. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And again, you'll be receiving an email with information on our 2 upcoming webinars, and then a recording from today. This is also live on Facebook, so if you follow us on Facebook, you can rewatch it there. And thank you, Damon and Lily. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming. See you later.